The restaurant sat on a narrow street where the city felt slower and more human, and the walls carried the warmth of many years of ordinary lives passing through. It was the kind of place people found by accident, and then remembered forever because nothing there tried too hard. The tables were simple, the chairs creaked softly, and the light came from small lamps that made everyone look kinder than they felt. Near the back wall stood an old piano that had survived longer than anyone could remember. Its wood was worn, smoothed by countless hands, and its keys carried a gentle, uneven color from age and care. The piano did not belong to the restaurant as an object, but as a memory because it had been placed there by the waitress' father many years earlier. He had played it every night after closing when the last plate was washed, and the door was locked for the waitress. The piano was not something to impress guests, but something to protect. She moved through the room with practiced ease, carrying dishes and listening more than she spoke. Her life had been shaped by work and responsibility, and she understood people by the way they sat and the way they spoke to those who served them. Most nights were quiet and predictable, and that comfort mattered to her. That evening, a man entered alone and chose a seat close to the piano. He wore plain clothes, but nothing about him felt plain. His posture was steady, and his eyes scanned the room as if he were measuring something unseen. He was one of the wealthiest men in the region, though no one there knew it at first. He had spent years surrounded by noise, control, and power, and he wanted one simple meal without attention. A young employee began playing the piano softly to fill the silence. The melody was imperfect, but sincere, and it drifted gently through the room. The billionaire listened, and something inside him tightened. The sound reminded him of his childhood when his mother played late at night, while worry sat quietly in the corners of their small apartment. Without meaning harm, he raised his voice and told the player to try again, more gently. The sound of his voice cut through the room, and the music stopped. A hush fell, and every small movement seemed louder. The waitress turned immediately and walked toward him. Her heart beat fast, but her face stayed calm. She had learned that silence in moments like this allowed disrespect to grow. She leaned slightly forward and spoke in a clear, steady tone. She warned him that if he raised his voice again near the piano, he would need to leave. She explained that the piano mattered and that yelling did not belong there. People waited for anger, for arrogance, for the kind of response powerful men often gave. Instead, the man froze and then softened. He looked at her not with offense, but with surprise and then respect. He apologized and said he had not meant to shout. He admitted that the music had pulled something old and painful into the open. He stood and asked if he could simply listen without speaking. He told the player to continue in their own way. The room slowly relaxed, and the piano filled the space again. As he listened, he noticed the worn floor, the quiet care in the waitress movements, and the way the place held together without luxury. For the first time in many years, he felt small in a way that felt honest. When the night ended, he thanked the waitress sincerely. He left quietly, carrying more than he had brought with him. That warning stayed with him because it had reached him not as an insult, but as truth. He did not leave the street right away. After stepping outside, the air felt cooler, and the sounds of this returned slowly, as if he had been underwater and was just coming back up. He stood near the door with his hands in his coat pockets and looked back through the window where the light spilled onto the sidewalk. Inside, he could see the waitress clearing a table and the piano resting quietly in its place. For a long time, he had believed that power came from control over people's schedules, money, and outcomes. Yet in that small room, he had felt something different. A young woman with tired eyes and steady courage had spoken to him without fear. She had not known who he was, and that honesty had reached him more deeply than praise ever had. He walked slowly toward his car, but memories followed him with every step. He remembered being a boy sitting on the floor while his mother played an old piano she had bought secondhand. The keys were chipped, and the sound was uneven, yet it filled their apartment with warmth. Those nights were not easy because money was short and worry was constant. Still, the music gave shape to hope and reminded him that kindness could exist even when life felt heavy. Over the years, success had taken him far from those memories. He had learned to speak loudly in boardrooms and to interrupt without apology. People listened because of his name, not because of the truth in his words. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped listening altogether. That night, something shifted. The warning from the waitress did not embarrass him, it grounded him. It reminded him that respect did not come from wealth, but from restraint. Back inside the restaurant, the waitress finished her work and locked the door. She touched the piano lightly before turning off the lights, as she always did. She had not thought much about the man after he left. For her, it was simply another moment of standing up for what mattered, yet both of them carried the encounter with them into the night. Neither knew that this small exchange would soon pull their lives together again in unexpected ways. The next morning arrived quietly for both of them, though in very different worlds. Billionaire woke in a large apartment filled with glass, steel, and silent sunlight, entered through tall windows and touched furniture that had been chosen by designers rather than memory. He sat at the edge of his bed longer than usual, thinking about the restaurant and the piano and the waitress' calm voice. He realized that no one had spoken to him like that in years without asking for something in return. As he prepared for the day, meetings waited, and messages filled his phone. Executives expected decisions, assistants expected direction, yet his mind kept returning to the small space where music had mattered more than status. He canceled one meeting without explanation and left the building alone. This surprised his staff, but no one questioned him. Across the city, the waitress started her day early. She lived in a small apartment above a bakery and woke to the smell of bread and the sound of delivery trucks. Her life followed a simple rhythm of work, care, and quiet reflection. She made tea and thought briefly about the man from the night before, not with fear or pride, but with curiosity. She wondered if he had understood why she spoke the way she did at the restaurant. She opened the door and let in fresh air. She wiped tables and checked the piano keys one by one. The piano had always been a promise to her that something gentle could survive in a hard world. She believed that protecting small things mattered even when others did not notice. Later that afternoon, the billionaire returned to the same street. This time he came during daylight when the place looked even more ordinary. He stood outside for a moment, unsure why he had come back then. He stepped inside and took a seat away from the piano. The waitress recognized him immediately. Her body tensed for a second, then relaxed. When she saw his expression, he smiled politely and waited until she approached. He thanked her again and said he had been thinking about her words. He asked about the piano and listened carefully as she explained its history and her father's story. For the first time in a long while, he listened without planning his response. He felt something shift as she spoke. He saw how her life carried meaning without excess, and how her strength came from care rather than control. In that quiet exchange, a connection formed that neither of them named. It was built not on romance or power, but on mutual respect, and it marked the true beginning of a change that would ripple far beyond that small restaurant. They spoke only a few minutes, yet the conversation stayed with both of them long after it ended. He ordered a simple meal and ate slowly, paying attention to the room in a way he had not done before. He noticed how people spoke softly, how no one rushed the piano, and how the waitress checked on an elderly couple with extra care. Nothing about the place was efficient by corporate standards, yet everything felt complete as he ate. He asked the waitress about her life, not in a curious way meant to impress, but in a genuine tone that surprised even him. She answered carefully, because she was used to keeping her world private. She spoke about growing up around music, about learning responsibility early, and about choosing this job because it allowed her to stay close to what mattered. She did not mention struggle directly, yet it lived between her words. He shared very little about himself. He simply said that he used to love music before life became complicated. That honesty felt risky to him, yet also freeing. She nodded, as if she understood without needing details. When he left that afternoon, he did not leave a large tip this time. He paid the bill properly, and thanked her with steady eye contact. That restraint meant more than excess. She watched him go and felt a quiet sense of respect that surprised her. Days passed, and he returned again and again, always quietly, always listening. Sometimes he came alone, and sometimes he brought a notebook and sat in the corner writing nothing at all. He never raised his voice, he never corrected the music, he simply allowed the space to be what it was. Other customers began to notice him. They did not know his name, but they sensed his presence. Some assumed he was a writer or a man, and thought no one guessed the scale of the world he controlled outside those walls. For the waitress, his visits became part of the rhythm. She did not change how she behaved. She did not seek favor or expect reward. She treated him like any other guest, because that was who he chose to be. There one evening, the piano player did not show up. The room felt emptier without the music. The billionaire looked toward the piano, and then at the waitress. He hesitated before asking if the piano was ever played anymore by someone who truly knew it. She paused, then said softly that she used to play, but stopped after her father passed. The words carried weight, but no bitterness. He did not press her. He simply said that the piano seemed to miss her. That sentence stayed with her long after the night ended. It opened something she had kept closed, and without either of them realizing it, the piano was about to bring the past into the present once more. The following evening, the restaurant was quieter than usual. Only a few tables were filled, and the air felt heavier, as if the room was waiting for something. The waitress moved through her work with the same care, but her thoughts returned again and again to the piano, and to the words the man had spoken. She had not touched the keys in years, because the sound carried too much of her father's voice and presence. Still, something inside her had stirred when she finished serving the last table. She stood near the piano longer than necessary. The billionaire sat nearby, reading nothing and watching the room without intruding. He did not look at her directly, yet he was aware of every small movement. He sensed a moment approaching, but refused to push it. Finally, she sat on the bench slowly, as if testing whether the past would allow her back. Her fingers rested above the keys and trembled slightly. The room grew quiet, not because anyone asked for silence, but because everyone felt change. She played softly at first, choosing a simple melody her father used to hum while cleaning the kitchen late at night. The sound was gentle and imperfect, and deeply human. Her shoulders relaxed as the music carried her forward. Memories surfaced, not as pain, but as warmth. The billionaire felt his chest tight. He did not move, he did not speak. He allowed the music to reach him fully. For the first time in decades, he did not analyze or judge. He simply felt. Other guests listened with stillness. Some closed their eyes, some smiled without knowing why. The piano no longer felt like an object in the room. It felt like a voice, telling a story everyone understood. When the song ended, there was no applause, there was only quiet respect. The waitress stood and returned to her work with tears held back, but peace restored. The billionaire stood as well. He thanked her quietly, and said that the music had given him something he thought he had lost. He did not explain further. He left with the same calm presence he always carried. That night, both of them slept differently. She dreamed of her father smiling beside the piano. He dreamed of a small apartment filled with music and hope. Neither knew yet that this shared moment would soon grow into a decision that would change many lives beyond their own. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed in a way that was hard to describe. People lingered longer, conversations softened. The piano was no longer background sound, but a quiet presence that seemed to invite honesty. The waitress began to play more often, not every night, and never to perform. She played when the room felt right and stopped when it did not. Her music was never perfect, yet it carried truth, and people responded to that. The billionaire continued to come. He chose the same seat and spoke little. He listened not only to the piano, but to the people around him. He noticed the struggles hidden in casual words and the strength behind tired smiles. This place reminded him of what his own One evening, he asked the waitress if she had ever considered teaching music. The question surprised her. She laughed softly and said life had taken her in another direction. He did not challenge her answer. He only said that her playing reached people in ways money never could. That sentence stayed with her. It made her think about the choices she had made and the dreams she had placed aside for survival. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included music again. Meanwhile, the billionaire began making changes in his own life. He spoke less in meetings and listened more. He corrected people gently rather than sharply. His colleagues noticed the difference, though they did not know its source. One afternoon, he returned to the restaurant earlier than usual. The waitress was surprised to see him. Before opening, he asked if they could talk privately for a moment. His voice carried respect, not authority. He told her that he was planning to fund a small community music program in the neighborhood. Not as a public project and not under his name. He wanted it to exist quietly like the restaurant. He asked if she would consider helping guide it. She felt fear and disbelief rise together. She asked why he had chosen her. He answered simply that she protected what mattered even when no one was watching. She did not give him an answer that day. She needed time to sit with the weight of the offer. Yet as she locked the restaurant that night, she touched the piano and felt a sense of direction she had not. In years, something had shifted again. What began as a warning had grown into trust. And that trust was now asking both of them to step beyond the safety of their familiar lives. She spent the night awake listening to the quiet sounds of her apartment. The offer rested in her thoughts like a question that refused to fade. Helping guide a music program felt both exciting and frightening. She had built her life around stability and knew how quickly hope could become disappointment. The next day, she went through her routine with extra care. She served customers, cleaned tables, and checked the piano keys one by one. Each note felt heavier, as if waiting for a decision. Music had always been her comfort, but now it was asking something from her. When the billionaire returned that evening, she could see patience in his posture. He did not rush her. He ordered tea and waited. After some time, she sat across from him and spoke honestly. She said she was afraid of failing and afraid of wanting something she might lose. He listened fully and told her that fear was not a weakness. He shared that every major change in his life had begun with uncertainty. He said the program would not depend on her alone and that she would never be forced into the spotlight. He wanted it to grow slowly and serve children who needed a safe place to express themselves. Her resistance softened. She thought about the piano and about children who might never hear music the way she had. She agreed to help on one condition: the program would stay small and personal, and the piano at the restaurant would remain untouched. He accepted without hesitation. That trust sealed the agreement more than any contract could. They shook hands not as employer and employee, but as equals. Over the next weeks, plans formed quietly. Unused rooms were found, instruments were donated, and word spread gently through the neighborhood. The waitress visited the space after work and helped arrange chairs and music stands. Each small task brought her closer to a part of herself she thought she had lost. The billionaire watched from a distance. He funded what was needed, but never interfered. For the first time in his life, he felt useful without being in control. As children began to arrive, curious and uncertain, the room filled with nervous energy. The waitress welcomed them with warmth and showed them how to treat instruments with care. She spoke with the same steady voice she once used to defend the piano. In those moments, both of them understood the true impact of that first warning. It had not ended a conversation. It had begun a journey that was still unfolding. The program grew quietly without announcements or recognition. Children arrived after school carrying backpacks and uncertainty. Some had never touched an instrument before, and some had never been encouraged to listen closely to anything. The waitress welcomed each of them with patience and clear boundaries. She taught them how to sit, how to listen, and how to respect sound. The piano from the restaurant was never moved. Instead, a similar old piano was found and repaired. When the waitress first played it for the children, her hands shook again, but this time from purpose, not grief. She showed them that music was not about perfection, it was about honesty and care. The billionaire visited only occasionally. When he did, he stood in the back and observed quietly. He saw children begin to smile more easily, and parents wait outside with pride and curiosity. No one treated him differently because no one knew who he was. That anonymity gave him peace. One afternoon, a boy became frustrated and raised his voice at another child. The room froze. For a moment, the waitress stepped forward calmly and reminded him that music asked for patience, not force. Her words were firm but kind. The boy lowered his head and tried again. The billionaire felt something tighten in his chest. He recognized himself in that moment. He understood how easily power could become noise. He realized how much restraint could change outcomes. As weeks turned into months, the restaurant and the program became connected by spirit rather than location. Some children visited the restaurant and listened to the piano with wide eyes. The waitress played for them sometimes. After closing, those nights felt full in a way she had never known. The billionaire made a quiet decision during one of those evenings. He would begin stepping away from parts of his empire that demanded constant control. He wanted to invest more time in places that asked for presence. Instead, the piano had taught him that neither of them spoke about the future in grand terms. They allowed it to unfold naturally. What mattered was already happening. Lives were shifting gently without force, and all of it had begun with a warning spoken calmly in defense of something fragile. That truth continued to guide them both forward.